Survey data indicates that at any one point in time, approximately 20% of Christians who attend church regularly are sharing their faith with non-believers. This, of course, is just simply not acceptable. What can we do to help Christians be more motivated, to be more encouraged, to be more equipped to share the gospel with non-believers? I'm joined today by Dr. Bernhard Palmer, a retired senior surgeon from the United Kingdom and one of the founding pastors of Christchurch in Baldock, England. To help with this, Dr. Palmer is a seasoned and skilled evangelist, so we're grateful to have him with us. Dr. Palmer, you've developed this beautiful metaphor of stepping stones to the gospel, stepping stones to the Christian faith, where each stepping stone represents evidence that we can cite to convince a non-believer that Christianity is true. And one of the sets of stepping stones that are most important, perhaps, are those that deal with evidence for Jesus, because, of course, Jesus is the Christian faith. And Christianity rises and falls on whether or not the resurrection took place. What kind of evidence can we marshal to show a non-believer that indeed the resurrection occurred?
This is fundamental stuff. Did Jesus actually get crucified? The Quran said he didn't. But his friends, his family, all know he did. Did he die on that cross? There's headlines in a local newspaper in England, that's a national newspaper, that said that he swooned on the cross, and this explained how he recovered. But that cannot be true when you think that there's only one person ever been known to survive a Roman execution by crucifixion, and that was a friend of Josephus's. The horrendous beating that he had beforehand could have killed people. But when he was on the cross, they wanted to remove the convicts from the cross dead by the end of the Sabbath day because of Jewish rules. So they did this practice of cruri fragram on the two soldiers either side. They got a mallet and broke their legs so they couldn't push themselves up to breathe anymore, and they rapidly died. But when they came to Jesus, they saw that he was already dead and hadn't moved at all and hadn't breathed. And so just to be sure, they stuck a spear in his right side. And in John 19 it says very clearly, out came blood and water. Now, we all know what happens when non-coagulated blood is in a test tube, that it settles and you get the red cells going to the bottom and the clear plasma at the top. And they wouldn't have known all these details about medicine in those days, but he saw the effect. I'm interested which of the various cavities the spear would have hit. It can't be the lung, the pleural cavity, because Jesus shouted out with a loud voice, and if you've got your pleural cavity full of blood, you're desperately short of breath. You couldn't shout out. And the heart itself is too small. It only contains about 70 ml when someone's dead. You wouldn't have seen the effect. I think it would have been the pericardial cavity. But, and he died of a broken heart in some way. But then they embalmed his body with 70 pounds of embalming ointment. Now, that would be enough to kill off anybody. It's highly aromatic stuff. And they would bandage him around. He was dead. They knew he was dead. Do you think there's any chance that Joseph of Arimathea wouldn't have done something if there's any possibility of his being alive? And then, after 3 days with no intravenous fluids, nothing, the stone is pushed back and uphill. It wasn't just rolled down. The Greek says that the stone was pushed up. And he's seen by the people who knew he'd died. And not just by one or two, many of them, over 500 people saw him. But one of the great things is that after his death and his resurrection, he walked on that Sunday to Emmaus, which is 7 miles from Jerusalem. So if you've had a great nail through your ankles, you don't walk 1 yard. let alone 7 miles there, 7 miles back, and convince everybody you meet that you've overcome death. Oh, there's so much evidence that people met him. His disciples were utterly convinced. They were willing to die to say this Jesus was God, and he did die, and he died there for my sin, but he rose again to prove that he is the Christ.